Good evening. How are you? Those of you out there, I'm sure you're checking the air quality index where you are as the air swirls around us from the fires of Canada and the heat builds because of global warming, pushing the hot air from the west to the east and from the north to the south. And so these are special times. Things that could have been avoided, but we didn't prepare. You got to wonder about all those Boy Scouts that studied and remember the expression, semper paratus, always prepared. Well, no, not really. In fact, politics seems to have the notion, to borrow another expression, carpe mañana, seize tomorrow. Not carpe diem, not seize now, not when you could do something about tomorrow. No, wait until tomorrow when it's too late. That's what we've got for leadership, and we have a couple of exceptions, but there's a storm coming, and the storm is not, the storm is a metaphor for what I see now, which is, I don't know if you want to say it's courage, but there are more strikes against what is Trump and his followers and what they did and what they're doing, and that they haven't had to account for it. And today is a day that particularly underscores that development. First of all, we find out that Trump has received a target letter. Now, I think I've gone over this before, but the categories in at least a federal prosecution are you a simple witness who just has some information that we want to have you testify in the grand jury, say about phone records, you work for a phone company? Or are you a subject of investigation? Are you the person that used the phone lines to conduct a fraud, say on a federal bank or something like that? Okay. And you're a subject because somebody said that you did this, but we don't yet have evidence to indict you. And then finally, there's target. Target is a person whom the government has enough evidence to indict. Now, why does a person get to know that? Well, there are a couple of reasons. But one is that if the government has enough information to indict you, they can't allow you to testify without telling you they have that. And they can then invite you to appear. And in 99 out of 100 cases, people do not appear. But there was a senator I know, a long time ago now, who was being investigated, and he had that opportunity. He went into the grand jury and purportedly persuaded the grand jury not to prosecute him. So I know of examples. I know that it's worked, and I know that it hasn't worked on other occasions. Another reason to go to the grand jury may be if the government says, I'm going to indict you, and I'm going to indict you for perjury, and they may tell you that. They give the most general descriptions of what they're investigating. If during the continuous grand jury, I'm sorry, I got bugs around me, during the continuous grand jury, if you've said something that's false and then you correct it, that's very helpful. They won't prosecute you for perjury. But that back and forth may result in an admission they'll use against you, which is another argument why one doesn't go before a grand jury. One doesn't give interviews to law enforcement. And it doesn't mean you're guilty. I know what people say. What it does mean is you're not going to answer questions that then give an opportunity to a government that already has decided you're guilty to go out and try to find ways to beat down your explanation. Now, that's natural and legitimate, but sometimes you can construct pretty elaborate explanations that are somewhat spurious to be evidence, but are treated as such at trial. This is on my mind because I'm writing memos feverishly now in a criminal case I'm handling, a post-trial. Other lawyers had it, and I'm looking it over and working on it. Now, so we have Trump, who's gotten a target letter. Now, the target letter does not mean we are absolutely going to indict you, but it usually means that. I did have a case a couple of years ago in which they wrote a letter, target letter, and if we didn't answer it by that Friday, they were going to be indicted. Okay, so they never were. I did things, but they never were indicted. So, and I did the things that you know, the tools of the trade, like you don't have evidence. Was one of my arguments. You know, pretty amazing. You don't have the evidence to prosecute. So that doesn't always work, but it is how it's supposed to work. And so I'm a pretty simple guy when it comes to some arguments. You don't have evidence, so you really shouldn't be prosecuting them, you know? You know how that works? Oh, what evidence don't I have? So we had that target letter, and that's going to be about, hallelujah, Lordy, Lordy, how is it possible? Oh my God, it's happened. Obviously, the Attorney General was nowhere near the decision-making on this effort, because what it does is finally, after all this time, confront the question of, is anybody going to be held accountable for the coup, the cuckoo coup? Are they going to have to come to court and explain themselves or stand responsible for phony electors and a bullshit legal theory by which they could sidestep the actual election and have the vice president supplant the will of all the people of the United States, notwithstanding the flaws in the elector system, and have Trump, who lost the election, become the president? That's what you call a coup in my book. That is what they tried to do. That's what they did not succeed at doing, but that is what they would continue to try to do, as many Americans who are dumber than my dog on his dumbest day believe this nonsense that, hey, maybe Biden didn't win the election. Don't let those people park your car. Too dangerous. Too dangerous. You have to be, I think the last thing I'm going to hear on this planet will be somebody saying in an operation room, oops. And we have that every day in the government by these elected officials. Oops. But they don't even say they're sorry. They don't even give us the warning. Oops. They write a book about it afterwards when we find out down the road why our cousin got killed because of groundwater that was poisoned by some local chemical plant. These are not imaginary possibilities, by the way. So, when will Trump be indicted? Not sooner than the 4 days they gave him to come in and testify if he wishes to do so. And like I said, there are circumstances, but they have to be very carefully calculated. I mean that in a good way, thought through. And it happens. So some are opining, since we only know of one target letter, does that mean Trump is going to be indicted alone? Well, not everybody who gets a target letter runs out in the street and says, hey, I got a target letter. Hey, James, did you hear this? I got a target letter. What are you, some sort of fool telling the world about it? Well, yeah, it could be because I follow Trump, you know, that would be part of it. So I suspect we could have, either a large conspiracy or a thin one. Larger would be, you got all the electors who are part of this conspiracy, the people in the White House who tried to get him to do it, Trump encouraging them, false appearances in court, conversations with the vice president, and the day of the riots. Now, is that a case you want to defend? And people are saying the stuff down in Florida is simpler. This is the show. Also, it's in D.C. Do you think you can get a jury in D.C. to find that Trump should be let off? I don't know, maybe. You have to be from another planet to have missed what went on here. But I think if it was described to you and you still had the pictures and stuff like that, people would say, not just yay, well, you can fill in the words, they would be convinced that this guy should go to jail. And he should go to jail in a Washington, D.C. second. So that's where I stand on that. The other Trump goings on today where Judge Luce Cannon had the case, and the prosecution wants to have the trial by December. That's doable. And the defense wants to have it after the election, after Trump has pardoned himself. And the judge basically thought December might be too soon, but she didn't judge it in or out. And she was not impressed with the notion of not having any date. And she said she was going to reach a decision on it and let everybody know. So, and there was some remark about, tell me about motions and stuff you're going to make that might delay the proceeding, and nobody did. So, as far as I know, I didn't hear a report about the goings-on of what happened in her courtroom. And she was up in Fort Pierce, Florida, and I had cases there, so I know the courthouse. It's a nice courthouse. I think it'd be overwhelmed by the smallest band of people who wanted to watch the trial or to cover it as reporters, but because I was in a couple of different courtrooms in that courthouse. But it's pleasant enough, and there's some nice restaurants nearby, and you're not that far from the water. So that's Fort Pierce. The other thing that's interesting is on this happy-go-lucky day in Michigan, the Attorney General there went off and indicted the electors, the phony electors, the ones that were going to fill in for the real electors. How did they ever, they're just blinded by Trump's bullshit, or hope, or they just want to be there when he comes in. And right now, I think we're going to see more rats leave the ship. You're going to see maybe more actions, and that's why I say I think there's a storm coming, and the storm is directed at Trump, I'm hoping. And I think we'll start seeing more direct criticisms of Trump as the nominee of the Republican Party in the selfish interest of those candidates who want to be that person. And some of that may become effective, because it's like one of these bad movies when the bugs and insects run over you. So, like in, what was it, Mummy? Was that the name of the movie? Could be a song, right? And so what do we have? In Michigan, we have, like I said, the local thing. We got the New York case. We're told again today that the Georgian case will come at the end of August. The date keeps moving along for her. And what I think is important is to kind of consider the overview we have here. The propellant for these traitors to American democracy and a Republican form of government are seeking to set up an autocracy. They have all the earmarks of it, okay? They have a separate system of loyalty. It's not loyal to the traditions that we think emanate either from the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution or the amendments that we made, particularly after the Civil War, and other amendments we've made. They don't buy into any of that, but they have to create a conspiratorial devil that they're fighting, and that's liberalism. That's denying the freedom of a business to sacrifice your life so that they can save money and make a greater profit and pay you less. It's just one possible view. Now, they have a separate system of imperiums in mind. They operate based on lies, disregard for the Constitution and the laws. And another interesting thing that shows they've thought this through is that what they're looking for is to take control of independent entities. Okay, so what does that mean? Well, in common language, it would mean something like, okay, the FTC, bang, you're now subject to the president directly, and I run your operation. And if you're the chairman, don't expect to have a lot of power. And so FTC, FCC, it goes on. And in this way, you bring to yourself more power, and you basically have an enemies list and supporters with this fickle gentleman, Trump. So how much, as we see this, are we going to be willing to embrace it? When I say we, I mean, is it going to be a respectable showing among Republicans who vote as Republicans or have, to say, yeah, that's what I want? Is that what you really want? And do you think, as happens in these affairs, that you remain on the good side of the criminals when they take over office and set up their fiefdom, of which you are now a subject rather than a creator or insider? And you've seen how loyal Trump is. So it's not just the earmark of his autocratic following. It is also his earmark. It is who he is. He knows better, you know. He's a genius. So I don't know if I ever told this story on a walk and talk, but when I was in college, we managed to convince Salvador Dali to give a lecture at Fordham University, where I was. I went to Fordham College, and then I went over to Columbia Engineering. A 3-2 program, 3 years one place, 2 in the other, got 2 degrees, 1 in physics and the other in engineering. But while I was at Fordham, I was on this committee that, you know, sought lecturers. I wasn't in charge of it, but the guy who was ran into Salvador Dali at a party in Manhattan and asked him if he would speak, and he said he would. Okay, so now this is what prompted the story, talking about Trump and how he describes himself and Salvador Dali. So we're in this room, and Dali had arranged, he had film to show, and he came, he was mustachioed, and he had on he dressed for the occasion. I don't remember what it was, but it was flashy. It was more like if he was presenting a musical presentation. But he came on the stage, and he spread his arms, and he said, "I am Dali. I am a genius." And we actually celebrated it because, you know, he was a genius. If you've ever seen his art or read his work, I went to his museum in Barcelona, and I've gone elsewhere to see his work. I have books on it. So he was a genius. But Trump, you know, there's this whole thing about belief. So does Trump believe he's a genius? Well, then we know Trump is delusional. So that's it for today. I like the direction we're going, not in the temperature, but in the storm that seems to be coming in our direction and pushing back against Trump and his cohorts. We just got to keep it moving, got to keep talking about it. And we can send this guy to the boneyard, and that's where we want him. So from my cathedral of trees, I say good evening, and I look forward to talking to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.